Before we get stuck into today's episode, I want to ask you a quick question. Right now, today, are you in exactly the same place in your practice as you were 12 months ago? Still worried about cash flow, still struggling to fill those diaries, and still struggling to build a great team? Second question, how confident are you that this is actually going to change in 2026? And my third and final question to you is this. How will you feel next year this time if nothing has changed once again and you are still right here where you are today? The same long hours, the same pressure, same sense of carrying it all on your shoulders, all by yourself. I don't know about you, but I did not start my practice only to feel trapped inside of it. And I'm guessing that's true for you. I'm guessing you started your practice for freedom. I'm guessing you started your practice to have an impact, but also to have a life that actually gets better as your business grows. So this is me kicking you off the freaking hamster wheel so that you can stop running in circles. This is me shaking you so you can wake up and note the freaking mud you are currently stuck in, so that you can make an informed decision around what you want your life and your business to look like in 12 months' time. Because the thing is this, you can choose the same old, or you can choose something better. This is up to you. And if you want better, then this is your invitation to check out the Private Practice Success Academy. Doors are now open for the January 2026 intake. At the time of recording this, we still have 6 out of 10 spots available. And spots are limited because these places include one-on-one access to me. In short, the Private Practice Academy is the business school for allied health professionals. In the academy, you will get the right plan for your level of business, no generic cookie-cutter advice. You'll also get all the tools, systems, and resources you need to execute your plan. And best of all, you will get real support from me for the moments you get stuck, for those moments you start doubting yourself, and those moments when you lose momentum. So that you're not guessing, you're not having to Google, and you're not trying to figure it all out alone at 10 p.m. after the kids have finally gone to bed and you have already had a full day of work. This is for private practice owners who are done with, I'll get this sorted next year, who knows that they are capable of more, who are ready to stop hovering in the same place and start moving forward properly in a sustained manner once and for all. Again, this decision is ultimately up to you. But if you are interested in just learning a bit more of what this could look like, then all you need to do is go to the show notes, find my email, which is gerda@private-practice-success.com. Click me an email with the word Academy in the subject line, and I'll send you all the details. It's as easy as that. So reach out and let's get this sorted. Well, hello there, fabulous private practice owner. My name is Gerda Mala, and you are listening to the Private Practice Success Podcast. And this is episode number 58. And today I'm going to continue busting 10 of the biggest myths about group private practice. So in episode 57, the one right prior to this one, I spoke to you about the first 5 myths. Yes, the goal was initially to cover all 10 in one episode, but you know me, I like to talk about allied health private practice, so it went a bit longer than expected, so I went, hang on, let's do a part 1 and a part 2. So you are now listening to part 2. And if you've listened to part 1, you will know that when I covered the first 5 myths around group private practice, those were myths around money, risk, burnout, and control. Now, that is 4 things I mentioned, but 2 myths were around money, and the others were about risk, burnout, and control. Now, if part 1 stirred something for you, maybe some discomfort, maybe some relief, maybe a quiet, oh shit, that's me moment, then get ready, because I think part 2 is going to allow you to go even deeper, because the next 5 myths are less about spreadsheets and structures, and it's a lot more about identity, your confidence, your ability to lead, and permission for self around group practice ownership. So let's get straight into it. I am sharing these in no particular order. It's not about the one is more important or more prevalent than the other. We're just going one at a time as I had them dotted down on my original list. Okay, myth number 6. And this is that belief. Sometimes it doesn't show up consciously, but it's there. And this is this myth and belief that you need to be good at business before you can even think about growing a group private practice. Before you can even think about starting and growing a group private practice. And this myth is everywhere. You know how you can identify it? It sounds like this. I'm just a clinician. I'm not very business-minded. Who am I to lead a team and tell people what to do? I should probably do another course first so that I can have more skills and knowledge. Or I'll wait until I feel more confident. And this golden oldie, I need to get all my ducks in a row first so that I can be fully ready. And maybe you can guess this, but underneath all of that self-talk is that old faithful called imposter syndrome. You know, that quiet, persistent little voice that says, who do you think you are to do this? But this is what I know. And I'm going to say this really clearly, and I want you to hear this. You do not become good at business before you start or before you grow. You become good at running this amazing practice of yours because you started and because you are growing it. So to be clear, leadership skills and management skills and business skills for that matter are not prerequisites for starting your group private practice. They are the byproducts. Don't know about you, but I didn't, and I think nobody wakes up one day suddenly ready to lead people, to manage conflicts, to make hard decisions, or hold all this risk and responsibility that we need to hold as group practice owners, as business owners. But the ability to do that, that is forged in the doing. And there's another layer here that doesn't get talked about enough. I think we all know about fear of failure, but very often what flips, especially female business owners up, is a fear of success. Because if this actually works, what does that mean? Who do I become then? What will be expected of me? How will this change my role in my family? How will this impact my time to give, my energy to my family? Will I still be needed in the same way? Will people still relate to me like they do now, or will they relate to me differently? There's a lot of fear around actually being successful, which is why that other old chestnut often pops up and we self-sabotage. Let's be honest, we do it all the freaking time. And it's because of these fears. Because at the core of it, when you are growing, and starting a group practice requires growth, growing a group practice requires growth. It asks more of you emotionally, psychologically, and relationally than just doing what you've always done. And that can feel pretty scary. But on the other hand, by staying small in order to avoid that growth or to avoid the fear of failure or to avoid the success, that doesn't keep you safe. It just keeps you freaking stuck. So the myth might be that you need to be good at business and you need to get all your business ducks in a row before you can start or grow a group private practice. But in actual fact, all it requires at its core is a willingness to start and to grow into the leader that your business requires you to be. And I know that you can do it. You need to believe that. And you are welcome to borrow some of my conviction and my belief in you, because I know you can. Myth number 7 particularly occurs within the minds and the decision-making processes of solo practice owners that are getting ready to take the leap into group practice ownership. And this myth is this belief that the independent contracting model feels easier and less risky, and therefore this must be the right model for you. I want to start off debunking this myth by saying that, yes, independent contracting actually does feel easier, especially at that stage of your business, at the beginning, because it feels lighter, it feels more flexible, and it feels like less responsibility, right? You don't have to learn the entire Health Professionals and Support Services Award. You don't need to have a full-time contract, part-time contract, and casual contract. You only need one independent contracting agreement. You don't have to do the level and depth of onboarding, for example. You don't have to hold your clinician's hand every step of the way. So it does feel much easier, right? Lighter. And as I said, in many cases, particularly in that early stage of group practice, it is. But where the issue around this myth comes in is that easier doesn't automatically mean that it's the right model for your practice. And it most certainly doesn't always mean that it's the right model for your practice in the long term. So what I often see is practice owners choosing the independent contracting model, not because it best serves their vision for their business, but because it feels safer emotionally and also intellectually. It is a model that, due to what it is, it's a model that creates more distance. Okay, yes, there were the earlier years prior to the 2024 changes in contracting where people treated their contractors like they were part of the team, and I already warned about it then. Because they're not part of your team, okay, they're an independent contractor, they're like a business associate. So contracting does create a bit more distance, which also means that it often reduces the need for those harder conversations. It also softens that sense of responsibility for this other person, because if you have an employee, there's a lot more responsibility that you hold as the business owner. And it therefore allows the owner also to stay closer to clinician, in inverted commas, rather than stepping into a leader, in inverted commas, right? It's like, no, I just want to, work together in the same location with other people. They do their thing, I do my thing. And therefore it feels like less responsibility again. And I want to be clear here, there's nothing wrong with choosing the independent contracting model when you choose it intentionally because it aligns with the vision that you have for your business, but that's often not why people choose it. The issue is when this decision is driven by a fear of leadership, a lack of confidence in managing people, discomfort with the level of responsibility that you take on when you've got employees, or just the avoidance of what feels like a very complex model when you step into an employment model for the very first time. Because what feels easier in that short term can quietly cap the stability within your business. Contractors often come and go. because they're going for the next person that's going to pay them more money. It impacts your culture within your business, availability, continuity of care, long-term scalability. So contractors can be a fantastic model. And I, for one, had a contracting model for many, many years. It was my main model. Hasn't been for probably the last 4 or 5 years, but I still have independent contractors. I have a hybrid model within my business. So I have a core group of employees. I see them like planet Earth. And then I have the contractors who's like these satellites around planet Earth that they there and we send them clients when the core team of the employees are fully booked. The contractors can be great when that model is chosen deliberately, designed properly, and aligned with the stage and therefore the strategy that you currently are implementing within your business. But if the reason you're choosing contractors is simply because they feel easier and less risky, that's not the right strategy. That is a comfort-based, fear-based decision. And comfort, I think you know this, rarely builds the kind of practice that you want. And I'm guessing the type of business and practice, therefore, that you want is one that is stable, one that is sustainable, one that can be values aligned, and not dependent on you holding everything together. So the right model isn't necessarily the one that feels easier or safer. It's the one that's going to support the business and you as the leader to achieve the vision you had for the business when you first started. That dream that you have for what it is that you are creating, and therefore the impact that you want. And you want to know what that ultimate goal is so that you can ensure that your business and your model therefore grows into achieving that. So to recap, the myth is that independent contracting as a model might feel easier and less risky, and therefore it must be the right model, when the fact is that the right model is determined, yes, sometimes by your stage of business for you right then, but ultimately it is determined by the vision for what it is that you want to create. And I, for one, will encourage you to start as you plan to continue. Of course, these decisions are always individual. I do not engage in cookie cutter business coaching or consulting with the people that I work with. And therefore, I know that there will be individual differences with regards to your choice of business model. But we want to start as we plan to continue, but that means you need to know what it is that you are here to create. Myth number 8. And this myth says that managing staff is a nightmare. Now, you might be hearing me say that and going, yes, it is, Gerda, because I am in the midst of a staff and or HR nightmare right now. And if that is you, I totally understand. Been there, done that. Okay. And you might be thinking, Gerda, I don't think this one is a myth. And, to some extent, I agree with you. Because I think if you were to go to any business owner, we're talking small to medium-sized business owners right now, just randomly in the street, and you were to ask them, what is your top challenge within your business? That thing that keeps you up at night, that stops you from freaking sleeping, or you wake up at 3 a.m. and that's the first thing you think of, it's probably going to be one of two things. It's either going to be staff, HR, managing people, or it's going to be cash flow. It's one of the two. Okay. And people, business owners, generally feel better equipped to deal with cash flow. It's like, I just need more revenue and I need to cut expenses, which is way easier in everybody's minds to do than having to manage a tricky team member or a tricky HR situation. And I often have people telling me that I never want staff because I've maybe been in a work situation previously where managing staff was a nightmare. Or they might share with me and say, I'm in these Facebook groups, Gerda, and people are sharing all this stuff, nightmares that they need to deal with. I don't want to have to deal with that. I just want to avoid it at all costs. And I hear you. I hear you, because managing staff and general HR is exhausting. Okay. But here's the reframe. It's not the staff that's the nightmare. Sorry to say this. The nightmare is when you, as the business owner, who's meant to be the leader, aren't setting clear expectations. That's a nightmare to me as your team member. If I don't know what you want from me, I'm going to be confused and uncertain, and I'm just going to be, worried all the time. Am I meeting expectations, yes or no? The nightmare is when you, as the business owner, avoid conversations with me as the team member. Because if you don't tell me what I'm doing wrong, I can't fix that. The nightmare is inconsistent leadership. If you say yes in this scenario to me, but no to the other person and vice versa, and it's like, I've got whiplash, I don't know, what's happening here, that's the nightmare. The nightmare is when there's a lack of boundaries. When I don't know, is this a line or what's the structure around this thing? And that's on you as the business owner. The nightmare is when you are just hoping that problems within your team is going to resolve themselves with time and with hope and optimism. And that rarely happens. So that is the nightmare when it comes to staff. So it's not really a people or a staff or a team problem. This is a confidence and a skill problem. So generally what I see is that there's a very big confidence and skill gap when it comes to practice owners managing and leading their team. And I would say the gap is generally bigger on the confidence side than it is on the skill side. Because as health professionals, particularly my discipline psychologists, they've got a lot of amazing communication skills. And a lot, if not the most of what you need to do as a leader and a manager for that matter, is embedded within how you communicate. So I know you've got those skills, but it's about allowing yourself to actually implement and apply it when you are the leader in that role. And that is a confidence gap that is there. But the wonderful part is that skills can be learned and confidence can be built. So when you learn and give yourself the permission to step into confidence so that you can set clear expectations, give honest, kind feedback, address issues early, and hold boundaries without guilt, that is when managing your staff and your team stops being a nightmare, because now it becomes contained, very professional, and even predictable. So no more emotional whiplash because you don't know what's going to happen when. So if you knew how to do this and you actually did it, managing staff would no longer be a nightmare. Because the fact of the matter is that managing team and staff can actually be one of the biggest pleasures within your business. It's never going to be all smooth sailing because we are humans. Your team are humans. You are a human. There are going to be times when there's not going to be a fit, and that is perfectly okay. You just then need to call on the confidence and use the skills and manage that situation. And I know you can do it. Myth number 9 is the belief that group practice ownership is only for extroverts or people. And I really want to bust this one properly because some of the best group practice owners that I know aren't extroverts. You know what they are? They are thoughtful, reflective, systems-orientated, values-driven, quietly decisive people. Some people might refer to them as introverts. Guess what? I'm an introvert. I still can't believe that I'm talking to you on a freaking podcast. That's not what introverts do. But it's because you're not here in the room with me whilst I'm recording it. That's why I can do it. It's much harder for me to walk into a room in front of lots of people and talk on a stage. But even still, because I know there's people listening, it's still scary and freaks me out. When I think about it too much, I think I need to stop. But introverts can be group practice owners because leadership is not about being loud. It is not about charisma, although you might think it might be easier, but that's not what it is about. It's not being on, like switched on all the time. True leadership, and I know because I've been in this game for a very long time now, and I've seen it not only in my own life, but in the many group practice owners that I've got the privilege of supporting. Leadership in group private practice is about clarity, knowing where you're going with this business, the vision, the mission, the values, the impact you're here to create. It's about consistency. It's about follow through. And it's about being emotionally regulated as the leader. So introverted leaders often excel here because they do think deeply. They listen well and they lead intentionally. Now, I'm not saying extrovert can't be amazing practice owners. Of course they can, of course. And we know that introversion and extroversion happens on a continuum. But this myth is often held by the introverts among us, where they go, I can't be a group practice owner because I'm not an extrovert. I'm not a people person. And this just ain't true. So if you've ever had the thought that I'm not enough of a people person to do this thing called group private practice, please know this. Group practice doesn't need more noise. What it needs is clear, grounded leadership. And if you know that that is what you can bring to the table, then group practice ownership most certainly is for you. Myth number 10 says that if you've got a group practice, then you are all about ego, money, and status. And I've seen this myth play out quite a lot of times. I will start off by saying that in Australia, being a business owner is actually really common. It was one of the first things that I noted when we migrated from South Africa to Australia. So back in South Africa, the done thing is you're an employee. You've got a 9-to-5 job and you work for somebody else for your entire life. And it would be very rare that somebody would start their own business. Like in my world, I didn't know any people that owned their own businesses back in South Africa. Not like as family or friends, right? Yes, you meet people because they're a business owner that you're dealing with. But within the circles that I lived in, that wasn't the done thing. And then you come to Australia and every second person has their own business, and you would speak to the other parents at school, pick up and drop off, and you start talking, what do you do? And most of them own their own businesses. Maybe the husband is a tradie, the wife does the admin, or it's a wife that is an accountant and her husband also does something in the business like bookkeeping or whatever. But it's very common for people to be especially involved in small to medium-sized family businesses. And within the allied health private practice industry, most of us have got small to medium-sized family businesses. So I know a lot of practices where both the husband and the wife is part of the business. I would say to a lesser extent than what I've seen in other industries, but it still happens. And I think the reason for this is that, especially within the mental health psychology part of the industry, we are still very much female dominated. And a lot of us then start group practices, and our male partners and spouses might have their own businesses or do their own jobs, right? And again, I'm generalizing here. But what I wanted to acknowledge is that business ownership is actually very common in Australia. And people support one another in going out and starting a business. But I find that if you do too well in your business, that's when tall poppy syndrome kicks in, just to, bring you back to earth so that your head doesn't grow too big. So it can just deflate that ego that you are developing just a tad little bit. So it can be really challenging to grow a really successful, relatively large group private practice when very often people look at that as reflective of ego, money, and status. And very often this is not coming from within our industry. This is often coming from outside our industry. But at times it does come from within our own industry. And I've been on the receiving end of that. I will never forget when I started, when was it, back in 2014, 2015, I started talking about business as a psychologist. And it's when I started to run half-day workshops and my weekend masterclasses on private practice success. And the amount of criticism I received was immense. I knew I was going to get criticism, but I didn't expect it to be as bad as it was. And people were telling me that I'm all about the money, and how dare I speak about private practice owners making profit. This is not who we are. This is not what we do. We're not about the money. And the amount of messages and emails and threats that I got, it was just crazy. And, I didn't talk about it at that point in time. I just went, yeah, okay, well, I'm still doing it. Because I had come off the back of a number of years of really having to work so freaking hard to build my practices. I had made every mistake in the book. I had cried so many tears, and I had to learn the hard way how to run a sustainable, profitable, and I will very importantly and loudly add, values-based, impact-driven psychology group private practice that I know for sure makes a difference in the lives of people each and every day, still to this day. I knew that. And I knew that it doesn't have to be this or that. It can be and. That yes, we can help people and impact lives, and we can still be okay financially as helping professionals, and we can still make enough money to pay our team well. We can have the impact and have a great business. And it was hard for a lot of people in the industry to hear it. So that was my experience there, but I've spoken to a lot of practice owners with a similar experience, where people have gone, why are you posting all this stuff on social media about what you're doing? How dare you say that? How dare you talk about mental health in that way? And it takes a lot of courage to do that. And when I see people speak up loudly and proudly about the impact that they're having with their business, I know that they're probably copying some flack at some level, potentially. I do think our industry has come a long way, and I do think our community even is coming a long way, but it's so important. Copying that flag, I'm happy to do it because I know at the end of the day, it reduces the stigma around mental health for when we do it at the practice, but it also reduces the stigma for me as a business consultant around having a profitable practice that helps people with their mental health. It's like, it's okay. Heart surgeons, neurosurgeons, they all still charge money. Are they not allowed to make money? And I'm not saying we should charge what they charge. We should just charge what we should charge for our industry and for the work that we do, for the skills and the experience and the training that we've put into it. That is okay. So coming back to group practice ownership, often when somebody starts to build that group practice, the narrative at times become, they think they're better than us solo practice owners, or they think they're better than me as a clinician that's working at Queensland Health, and they're all about the money. That's why they're doing it. They've got a big ego. Who do they think they are to do this? And what could happen, and this is the risk why I want to raise this, is that if you internalize any of those messaging, and you know what, that messaging can come from one person in your life. But if this is an important person, like a significant other, a best friend, a sibling, that one person could lead to you shrinking who you are as a human, what you're doing. It can cause you to hesitate or to downplay the vision that you have, the impact that you want to have in this world. When in reality, when I deal with group practice owners, I can tell you for certain that the reason why they went into group practice ownership is not about ego, money, or status. It's about increasing client access. It's about creating a fantastic workplace for clinicians. It's about supporting, teaching, training, mentoring, coaching clinicians. It's about bettering the mental health system. That's why they go into it, because they want to impact this industry we all love so much. So if you know in your heart that what you want is to be a group practice owner, choosing not to take that step because you're afraid of potential judgment, that isn't humility. That really is self-abandonment. I want to make it clear to you that when you avoid starting or growing your group private practice because you are trying to stay palatable to those around you, that is what keeps our industry under-resourced and overstretched. Because you've got something amazing to give our industry. All you need to do is say yes to starting and building your very own level 5 and even beyond into a self-running private practice. That, my friend, was, and it's got everything to do with fear, conditioning, and outdated beliefs. And if any of these myths felt uncomfortably familiar, I want you to know this. You are not broken, you are not incapable, and you most certainly aren't running behind. You are just standing at the edge of your next level of leadership. And you are the one who gets to choose whether you step forward or whether you stay with what feels familiar. And whatever you choose is perfectly okay, but it is your choice. And if the choice is to start or grow that group practice, then you know where to find me. Because as always, I'm right here, willing, ready, and able to help you build a practice you can't stop smiling about.